How many crime categories is the FBI responsible for?
It's
We
like
got one.
270, I think. I've forgotten the number, but it's way up there. Back to
I
when I
think it's
was in,
closer to 400.
I think so. When I was in Birmingham, I got horse thief, the Mann Act, stealing car. I mean, it was just crazy.
And then they've even got one category that says if nobody else was responsible, the FBI is responsible.
It's true.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to part 3 of our interview with Dale Watson. And the reason I'm smiling is because this guy makes me laugh every time he opens his mouth. I got to tell you, he put on a nice suit for today's interview, but he just told me he's got to have that back to shop in 2 hours. So we got to hustle on through this. But you know what? That's the cool thing about bringing your friends and your colleagues on to a podcast like Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. We've been talking for 30 minutes, just reliving old memories here. And that just comes from that, you folks hear me talk about the law enforcement culture. Even though you retire, you're still friends for life. And that's where we are today. So, Dale, if you remember, when we finished part 2, we had just gone over your promotion to the first assistant director of the new Counterterrorism division within the FBI. And we discussed a lot of infamous events around the world that the FBI was participating in. Now, in this new position, I think in 1999, you proposed a reorganization of the Bureau's efforts to fight terrorism, right?
That is correct, yes.
And can you just tell us a little bit about that, what precipitated that, and what the initial response was?
Sure. I realized after having a division with the terrorism program, I realized that I was responsible for preventing acts of terrorism, solving the cases of the terrorism, and that's basically what we were doing. The bomb would go off, we rushed hundreds of agents to Africa, we rushed hundreds of agents to the USS Cole, and so I sat there, and I came back from the trip. I can't remember which event it was, but I'd been out of the country, and I came back to my office there, and I walked in one morning, and I saw my desk. I'd sit there and had to sort through the inbox. The calendar says I had to be at State Department 10, had to be across the street. It was all stuff that I had no control over.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized at that point when I came back that this is the wrong approach. We'll be chasing the dog's tail for years and not doing anything to really try to solve these things or prevent them. We can solve them, but still you have casualties. And so I thought, well, the best way to do it is prevent it. And so I looked around and I decided Bear Bryant was a deputy director. He'd started a strategic plan, so to speak, like we do every year. And it was usually 100 pages that no one read. It got read was when you pull it off the shelf and dust it off, and it's all the priorities and stuff like that. So it is a big document. So I realized that, but he had a guy working for him that was a consultant. I did not know any consultants at the time. I wasn't real interested, but I realized I needed help. And so Dr. Tom McQueenie came in. He'd done some work for DEA, as a matter of fact, years ago in the budget area or something. And I explained it to him. I said, I'm sitting here waiting for something to blow up. And in the interim, we were chasing all kind of fugitives, Joanne Chesmar. I mean, a whole list of fugitives that really were nasty, that needed to return to the States for, to face the law, face of their, crime that they'd committed. And so I was always busy. I didn't really have time to focus on a lot of things. And the White House was screaming and yelling about stuff. So it was a trying time, but then I said, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore, that we're going to move the Bureau to a proactive approach around the terrorism program.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how much resistance I got. It was probably the hardest thing I ever did, because we can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And so we developed a very proactive program. I was personally held each SAC responsible for their terrorism program around this United States. And so we did an analysis, and, you got examples where some field offices had 5 resources for CT. 3 of them were working stolen car cases. And I said,
Wow.
that's crazy. I mean, we're going to get blown up here. And so I went out, and I lost some friends during this time. I mean, I had met with all the SACs, quarterly meetings. I met with all the supervisors and LASACs in a big meeting down in Tampa that I got the Attorney General to go to when I presented this plan. And I basically said, you're going to be held accountable for what you're doing. If you don't know there's a threat in your territory, shame on you. If you don't have resources, give it to me. I'll get you resources. But I'm going to rate you. And I rate them I have input in their performance appraisals. And if you don't carry out this plan, I'm going to rate you unacceptable and executive. And the SACs, the majority of them, a long majority of them, said, this is it. This is a good deal. We finally have some plan here to go forward with it. And I only had 2 that said they wouldn't do it. I don't know what they're doing now.
Well, and this is not just international terrorism. This is also domestic terrorism, right?
Absolutely. Both sides. We had a domestic terrorism force that was working, and we had CT. The field offices kind of blended that. If they didn't have a real issue or something, they would blend it. But there was a lot of angst out in the field. I will tell you this, that in order to really drive this home, I did a very sensitive report of the capabilities of our field office, and red, yellow, green. And I'm here to tell you it wasn't a pretty picture. I only made 3 copies, one for me, one for the director, one for the Attorney General, and gave it to them. And immediately we had a discussion about it. And then Director Free retires, and somebody else comes in and doesn't necessarily see eye to eye to what we were trying to do. But I knew we were going to get hit. I knew every day, I knew that we were getting closer to this thing moving to the U.S. I will confess that I miscalculated on the 9/11. I thought there would be one more overseas in the Far East. And I kind of was planning, pre-positioning people to be able to do something reactive, which is not a good thing. And we were working hard at the areas where we thought they'd get hit. But then 9/11 comes by, and, we get caught.
Well, before 9/11, we had the USS Cole bombing, right?
That is correct, yes.
So
That's interesting.
That was October of 2000, I believe.
Yeah, it was. Actually, this ties in 9/11. I was briefing the new director on what we were doing with the Cole investigation when 9/11 happened down in our operations center. But the USS Cole was very tragic. A number of people were killed. A good story out of that, though, I hate to say a good story out of something that negative. The Navy had decided, or the Pentagon had decided, to go to smaller ships. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Vaguely.
Rather than the huge ships, other than the aircraft carriers, they wanted to downsize and have more of them. And so Cole was a full-size ship, and they elected to, the Cole blast happened, and it would have sunk in that bay over Yemen if it hadn't been for the crew that literally bailed out that seawater coming in. And the reason that was the propeller on the back of the ship. The blast was so strong that it blew that seal to keep the water out. And so if you didn't have enough people to do that manually, that ship would have sunk. And so I remember talking to, about 3-4 days after it, to the ship's captain and on the deck. And I said, you ought to be very proud. He said, I am very proud of the people here. And they've worked continuously until we got some more help here. I said, well, certainly they'll recognize you at the Pentagon. He says, no, the rule in the Navy is if you run one aground or if something happens to your ship, you're relieved of command. So
wow,
that's what happened. But a good guy. And that ship was named after an Army bugler in World War II. I don't know why I threw that out there, but for trick.
Well, and that attack was carried out by which organization?
It's al-Qaeda.
Yeah. So I hate to give them even any recognition, but it kind of ties into what we're going to talk about with 9/11.
Must have been, oh God, yeah, Bin Laden and the crew. You look at those attacks. There was the African bombing, truck bomb. Well, the New York First World Trade Center way back was a truck bomb. Truck bomb in Africa. Khobar Towers was a truck bomb. USS Cole was a boat bomb. And then I guess it was time for an airline attack. That's how they played it out. It's difficult. An interesting story about the Cole was Director Free called me. We were back, and he said, Del, there was acrylic writing on some of that residue from the bomb. And he says, the Russians were in there helping them with the Civil War years ago. He says, and the wall had come down. We were friends, quote unquote, with everybody. He said, why don't you go over and talk to the old KGB people and see if they can help us with finding this explosive. See if there were some numbers or something. Said, really? He said, yeah. So I flew over there, landed and all that stuff. And they were, yes, we were trying to help you. And I don't know if I better not tell this story. They tried to weigh in and help us, but there's a real.
You flew over to Moscow?
Yeah. Well, I was a G5. So then they came and they brought the explosives with them when we met with them. So it was kind of melancholy situation there for a little bit. So
wow. Oh, Mr. Watson, we're going to show you how this works.
Here it is. She's going across the table, C4, man.
Oh my gosh. Now there's a terrorist, I think, that's still in Guantanamo Bay, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Yeah.
Was he involved in all of these acts of violence?
Yeah, there was. I don't know. It's strange, though. Our justice system's strange. About 3 years ago, I've been gone a long time, 2 people knock on my door, peek in the window. That's a bad sign. And there's some investigators out of DOD, quote unquote. And they said, well, we're here to talk to you about the Cole. Or was it the Cole or 9/11? It was 9/11, I guess. And they said, we're going to put them on trial under UCMJ down in Guantanamo. I said, well, that's good. And he said, we want you to be a defensive witness. And I said, what are you, nuts? I mean, so our system of government is that, these guys need to go and you know where they need to go. And then at the other side, right, it's got to have representation by some legal people. And I don't know where they got any idea that I was going to be subpoenaed down there for the defense.
Wait, now you mentioned the UCMJ. Can you tell our listeners what that is?
Yeah, that's a uniform code of military justice that's set up that has laws for military people if they do domestic assaults or steal something or disrespect. I mean, it's their system. They actually have judges, and it's quite different than what our Title 18 stuff is.
Yeah,
so
that's. I think I've told you this before, Dale, but I did a contract job for about a year with DOD's Office of Military Commissions.
Yeah.
And
I think these people are out of that. I'm not sure. So
yeah, probably they brought us in. It was me and another retired DEA agent to review the cases down in Guantanamo Bay. And so we're working for a 1-star general who was just an impressive man. He's a Harvard graduate, but just could dumb things down so that I could understand it. Just truly enjoyed working for the man. But after we reviewed the cases, we went to him and was like, General, some of these people have been in custody here for 12, 14 years. What is it you think we're going to find? They haven't left the island of Cuba. And he, after he thought about it, he said, that makes a lot of sense, Murphy, which kind of surprised me that he would say that. But then that led to us taking a closer look at ISIS.
Well, ISIS, too. Think about it. One of the administrations down the road, I think it was Obama, or turned out 3 or 4 of them, and they sent them back, said, promise not to be engaged. And they ended up back on the battlefield, though. How stupid is that?
How naive can you be?
Yeah. Well, I wrote down here, Title 8 or UCMJ obviously doesn't have a speedy trial act like the federal government does. You have 30 days to indict and, 2 more what's to take them to trial. Actually, I don't second guess anybody, but that was probably not a good idea to bring them back.
Yeah. I don't think so.
Give them back to the host country if they're capable of doing anything. And if not, then if they get away, run them down.
Unbelievable. It's amazing. That's one of my pet peeves of our country right now. We just seem to want to be a kinder, gentler nation where anybody can do anything and it's okay. We want to let criminals out of jail. We want to let terrorists out of jail, and that's a whole different episode. I usually bitch about that over on the Patreon subscriber channel.
It's hard to get people in jail, to keep them in jail.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I mean, seriously. So
now, I want to ask you. So on your plan that you submitted, that was in '99. I can't remember if you told me this or I looked it up and found. I think I looked it up and found this information that the Department of Justice came back and rejected your ideas because it was going to cost $58 million. And here's the kind of the tickler to this whole thing. They rejected that to you on September 10th, 2001.
Yeah, it was a budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got zeroed out. I asked for, I don't know how many more analysts, because we need analysts and more resources. I could steal resources within the Bureau, get these people out of the working the drugs or whatever cases or less priority. I could do that. I couldn't fund anything. We couldn't hire anything. So we put that in and it was zeroed out. Zero. And that came in, I don't know exactly. I think it was the 10th. Might have been a couple of days before. So we were headed on a path of being blinded. I mean, I'm here to tell you, I hate to say this, and I haven't said it in public, but maybe once or twice. And I really don't like to say this because it's terrible, but it's a good thing they attacked us when they did. Because if they'd waited another year, they could have had 10 cities just for what was going on across the street at DOJ and their priority. And so I've harbored that, but that's a true story. And it's hard to tell somebody that, though, really. I mean, we wouldn't have had any analysts where Title 50 stuff was going away rapidly. They thought that was,
too invasive.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you sit there at 99 and try to move forward. I did the best I could. We had specific criteria around this, Steve, as you would understand. And the advocate that kept it going until he left was Director Free. He understood it. Not too many people on the 7th floor working with me understood it. Oh, you can't do that. We're criminal investigators, and they're not bad people. They just didn't understand. And I wasn't that smart, but I will tell you though, and I don't blink an eye at this, after 9/11, I knew the knives would come. I knew somebody was going to get blamed. I really thought the Bureau was going to take a hit for this, really. And that plan saved it. It saved us for a lot of reasons. And if we hadn't had it, I'm sure we would have probably. There was a big push on it at the time to break up the FBI into an MI5, MI6 concept, and I think you understand that for your listeners. The Canadians, or the Brits is a good example, but the Canadians are a good example where they split off their intelligence work separately, and it was in sieges, and then they had the RCMP to the criminal work. And so the idea that they thought of, congressmen, senators, thought of, well, maybe that's what we ought to do. Maybe we ought to jettison the terrorism program specifically and under Title 50 and put that underneath a different organization. And I argued vehemently against that because cops like to talk to cops. And I mean, what do we want to do? And be kind of a mini CIA internally or something. But I never will forget one of the senators came for a briefing. They all came for a briefing and started asking questions. And I always had that plan. I said, we had an accountability plan. It wasn't finished. We were working. We knew where our vulnerabilities were. We'd asked for money. We didn't get it from you guys. And he said, well, I didn't, I've always blah, blah, blah. And so I think if we had some more time, there were triggers out there. We were the plant tripwire, so to speak, and do something with it. But we were limited in a lot. The education people wouldn't allow us on campuses to interview people. INS, they couldn't track 18 to 20 or 30-year-old males coming from countries that we were interested in. I mean, whole scheme was, but we were chipping at it. We were getting there, getting close. So I was very proud of it, and I'm glad we had it.
Well, that was the very next day is 9/11, and then miraculously your plan was approved, wasn't it?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah, we're reactive. This is what we're going to do. Guns, drugs, civil rights, first protection. And then all of a sudden, yeah, we're going to be preventive. We're going to be proactive. And that never rolled off anybody's lips there at the Bureau. And they took it and tried to run with it, which was good. And then I left in 2002, and it continued. And I think it's fundamentally helped the Bureau. I'm not a genius about it, but I just knew that what we had in place, what we had going, chasing all these fugitives around the world and reacting to those cases. And then like Oklahoma City happened before, I knew that we had to do something.
It's amazing when these events happen, we all become very patriotic and we want to throw everything we can at it.
That's
and
right.
that lasts for a few months and everybody gets a little more complacent. Remember when 9/11, I was in D.C., you were in D.C., you could drive down the toll road. There were American flags on every overpass on the Dulles Toll Road. I mean, it was a sense of pride that somebody hit us and we're all joining together. We're all back as one rather than having all these divisive factions like we have now.
But also, I'll tell you what happened. Haters came out too, though. I mean, on the other side of that. And I tried to keep a very, very low profile. I mean, for the sake of my family, and get letters in there. My family's down in Texas. They know you're married and have 3 kids and know where you live. I mean, that kind of baloney, not over and over again, but here it is, Thanksgiving, and everybody's here, but my uncle, he's dead because of you. And so,
oh my gosh,
I didn't want to fight those battles like that all the time. And they have eventually over a period of time. So I said, we're working for me. They'd come in and say, yeah, the neighbors came over last night and brought cookies or they fixed dinner. I said, man, you got a racket going here. I never had any of that, but I didn't want it. And I don't even think my neighbors knew what I did.
Well, if you remember afterwards, after 9/11, there was, hearing after hearing after hearing, who dropped the ball, who's responsible. Everybody wants to point the finger at everybody else.
That's true.
I think some of the reading I've done preparing for our interview, and again, for our listeners, Dale and I have been friends for a number of years now, but we have the friendship that we can be open and honest with each other. There was a lot of accusations the Bureau wasn't sharing information. There was a lot of accusations that the CIA wasn't sharing information. All the federal law enforcement agencies. Based on our experience, we know the personalities within law enforcement. There's a ton of type A's. Even within our own agency, we don't share with each other because that's my case. That's my investigation. I've been working this for a year now. You can't have any of this information, which is all BS. And if you think back before Grenada, when we had to go down to Grenada and get those kids out of the medical school down there, our military wouldn't even share information with each other, which eventually resulted in what they call a purple command, where they do have information sharing capabilities now. I don't know if that continues because it's been so long. And again, as time goes by, we become complacent and more self-important. But just frustrating.
Yeah, that information sharing piece was part of the new plan we started in 99. And the plan was that I knew that the next act of terrorism could probably be prevented not by the FBI or any federal agency, but some cop in St. Louis sees some plastic barrels in front of somebody's house that doesn't fit, pulls somebody over. That information has got to be shared. And so to answer your question, and this was under the radar, we experimented with an information sharing program and called it MaxCap, part of MaxCap 05, where municipalities could have a big wheel, so to speak, of information, okay? And the Bureau would be in the center. These would be spokes. There were like 30. I'm making up this number. I can get caught not being accurate with it. So we elected to for a lot of reasons. We had an AG that was from Missouri. So when we got ready, it was a spoke and wheel setup. And so we wanted to initiate it to test it. And what we wanted was to be able to access local police information around any suspicious things around the terrorism program. And we would have a center hub. They would put their information and protect it into the hub. All of us would, and they would all have access. And you'd have a board of directors that would determine what goes in and what comes out.
Mm-hmm.
We selected St. Louis, and I sent guys out there. They started working. I think there were like 25 municipalities around St. Louis that had databases. And so they were eager. They said, "You mean we'll get access to FBI data around terrorism?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Some people, you're not going to be able to put crap in there, etc." And so they all signed up, wanted to do it. We were ready to go. The Attorney General convinced him to go out and have a press conference out there announcing this. And so we're meeting with them beforehand. And a lot of answers to a lot of different questions. I won't bore you with it. What happens if somebody puts a poison pen in? If the mayor doesn't like the chief and he reports something, that turns out. So there were issues with that. So we got ready to go. Everybody says, "Yeah, I'm in. That one municipality that will remain nameless said, "No, we're not doing this." I said, "You're not doing this?" I said, "We're going out there and we're going to say everybody's doing it." And he says, "Nope, can't do it." I said, "Okay, then we're going out there and saying," and we had 37 or what the number was of the 38 or 24 instead of 25, and call out your jurisdiction. And he said, "You wouldn't do that, would you?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And so we did. And it worked for a good bit of time. There was a lot of issues, but it started working. So I felt better about doing that, because if some local policeman had stopped somebody, there was a probability, not 100%, that I'd know about that. And it's particularly if they were there on a visa or something that was, and we had the FBI there, and they said, "Oh yeah, we share information all the time." I said, "No, we're going to do this. So you got to share it." And they said, "Well, some of it's classified." I said, "You don't have to do the classified stuff. You got to do the unclassified. And you're crazy not to have relationships with all these people in
Right.
there."
Right.
And to include the EA and ATF and everybody. The time's over. So I really thought that the prevention side would get state and local. Somebody is going to know something that we can't possibly do it. You can't possibly team with DEA and get all the data we need. So that left us with analysts. What's the role of analysts? And there was a long pushback for that for years, that they can't do anything. I'm telling you, they're a lot smarter than most of the agents.
Absolutely.
And they would write papers, and they would see trends at whatever. That was that. I will backtrack a little bit. This came up in the 9/11 Commission. I don't know, Steve, I think I told you this. I got subpoenaed for that, believe it or not. And that's a different case. I'm retired.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up testifying for the 9/11 Commission for over 11 hours under oath. And they were seriously trying to pin the roads on me, so to speak. And so parts of the information sharing and this proactive program is written in the 9/11. They didn't give a lot of press to it, but they talked about it. And I remember specifically one of the senators came to me and he said, "Del," he says, "don't worry about this." He said, "We know the FBI is a national treasure. We're not going to do anything to separate that." So I felt good about it. As one senator out of 100. So
Maybe he'll bring you cigarettes in prison, right?
have you ever been goose hunting in Ireland? No, I haven't.
It's just amazing how they want to sit up there and not accept any responsibility for themselves. Oh, it's sickening.
You're exactly right, Steve. And my father, God rest his soul, told me one time, he says, after I was in the Bureau, he said, "All those people up there in Washington, D.C. are all in it for themselves."
Yep.
And I said, "No, that's not right. They're honorable people up here. It's just that they are. They're just a different ego." And that proved time and time again. We got sold out more times by our State Department that would leak stuff on very sensitive. The White House, I mean, we got kicked out of there many times. I actually went overseas and briefed one of the presidents of one of the Middle East countries about us doing something. And he said, to help us. And yeah, well, it leaked out the next day. And then you have all this work that you've done, and you say, what's wrong with you people? You're not going to prosecute this person. You take it across the street. Well, no, I guess not. Did I ever tell you my conviction rate is 90 out of 100? Oh, okay. Well, what about the 300 people you knew were guilty, but you were too afraid to
Yeah.
That's just, I mean, those things, those kind of things but there are a lot of good people across all the agencies, but yet at the same time, they're all interested in protecting themselves.
Yeah. It's very self-serving. It just makes you sick.
It does. I mean, I'd come out of there, some of those meetings, and say, what? I mean, that's not what you told me 6 months ago after I've done all this work and ready to snatch and grab.
It's,
sorry.
you look at,
but all right, but it's what reality was.
Yeah. You look at the Senate and the House now, and out of, those 600 plus people, honestly, I could probably count on one hand, no more than two hands, how many people that I would have respect for up there because of what you just said. I think they're all very self-serving as well. And it's amazing how they go in there with like a normal person's bank account and they come out multimillionaires. Wonder how that happens.
Yeah.
They continue to give themselves raises and they give them outs on everything so they can't be held accountable for anything. I think that's why there's not as much trust in our Congress as there used to be. One of the reasons.
I know you've testified before in Congress, and I have more times than I want to remember. But the difference between a closed hearing and an open hearing is night and day. In closed hearings, they're pretty interested, and they'll do things and say things, and then they'll get you in a public hearing and
in front of the cameras.
Yeah, and say, well, you didn't brief us. I don't know anything about this attack. And I've been up there probably 10 times over the last 8 months or something. I mean, I said, Senator, you knew. I told you in closed session. You can't talk about that here. Yeah, well, and then he called me in conference. So one of them did call me. There was some issues of Americans being kidnapped down in South America. And I went and briefed them, and I said, the probability of them still being some of them, I better be careful. So I said some things and very clear what was going on down there. It's very difficult to do anything. The locals wouldn't do anything. They'd put the money out, and it was a business. Then he invites the family up with these people and has their big pictures on the public hearing. I walked out and said, this is not going to be good. And so he says, hey, what about it, Mr. Watson? You're incompetent? You don't know where are these people? And the audacity. I mean, seriously, I said, well, Senator, I've told you this in private. This is open hearing. I can't talk about it. And he says, well, I think it's incompetency. And of course, the family look at me like, you sorry? And I couldn't have worked any harder. So it's over, and they all run down. They come down and shake my hand. Thanks for coming up here. And I said, Senator, this is the last time I'll testify for you in open hearing. Of course, he called director and complained and whatever. So you're with all of that. You're battling with all of that mixed up, and I don't know what you might make out of it, but that's our system.
Yeah, it kind of sucks right now.
Really. Yeah,
it's been sucking for a long time.
All right. So where are we? We still hitting on coal, or are we done with that?
Yeah, kind of talking about the 9/11 events. And let me just tell our listeners right now, Dale and I have had some discussions offline, and he carries a heavy burden on his shoulders of responsibility just simply because of the seat that he occupied at the time. And that was the reason I want to make a big deal about him proposing this plan that, Congress like, oh no, we don't have the money. But yet the day after 9/11 happens, they find the money. It's amazing how they certainly don't want to come out in the public and say, oh yeah, the FBI suggested something to us. We blew it off. Oh, but look what happened today or yesterday. We were attacked, the biggest attack against the United States in the history of our country, over a few dollars. Now, what was it, $58 million? It's not a few dollars, but still, what's the price tag on protecting our country? Look what happened. I just want to say to you personally, Dale, one as a friend, but also as a professional colleague, I understand how you feel responsible, but I don't think you can pin this on one person's shoulders, especially when that one person has been trying to do things to better our abilities to protect our citizens and our borders, our country. And when you don't get the support of Congress, your hands are tied, right? I mean, I appreciate the fact that you do feel responsible, but I don't think that's deserved.
Thank you for those comments.
And I had written down, well, what agency, what terroristic group was responsible for the attack? We all know, but
yeah, it's out.
Yeah, same group,
same
group over and over.
Yeah.
My wife and I had just moved to the D.C. area. We were living out in Ashburn 3 weeks before 9/11. I was assigned Special Operations Division when they were over in Lorton, Virginia, and we were fairly close to Dulles Airport. And we had already become accustomed to hearing the commercial flights coming in and out every day. I mean, just continuously. It takes a little while to get used to that noise, but you do. And when they stopped all the commercial flights, that was one of the eeriest silences I've ever experienced in my life. And then every once in a while, you would hear a fighter jet go screaming by. You never saw them because they were already gone before you heard the sound. But I guess we were like most Americans at the time. We had already made contingency plans on how to get out of the D.C. area if this thing continued to escalate. We had our, you and I call go bags. We had a family go bag ready with provisions. We had eating locations established, how we were going to get there. My wife's going to take the kids and go first, and I would follow behind because it would take me a while just to even get home. You look at that. I remember thinking back at that time I never thought we would be in a position like that in our country. I mean, it was just one of the scariest things that you go through. But then, I think we were right to be concerned, but at the same token, I think common sense started to set back in. I don't remember how long they shut down commercial airline traffic in the United States. It was a number of days, if not weeks, before they started allowing flights again. But also, that's what I was talking about. When, every agent and every agency is putting in long, long hours, offering whatever they can to support the Bureau, to support our military, whatever it's going to take so that this doesn't happen again. But as you're driving down the Dulles Toll Road, almost even on the cars, people had American flags taped to the antennas on their cars. It just gave you that sense of patriotism and pride came back. It's a shame that we have to go through an incident like that for everybody to band together to, as a country, as one group to protect ourselves. Whew. I hope we never go through anything like that again. I know you
I did.
Agreed on that 100%.
Yeah. I remember where I was. I think it's like the Kennedy assassination for people more senior like me and you. You knew exactly where you were and what you were doing. And that's seared in everybody's, lots, and that's never going away. Right. And it was a terrible thing. And I remember being, I don't know, I'll keep this short. I remember being in the operations SIOC, which is the center there in the Hoover building. And I was briefing Mueller. Had only been on the job, I think, 5 days or 4 days. And I was trying to brief him on the USS Cole, the status of that case. Where were we? What were we doing? We got fugitives loose. We pin it on somebody. And so my EA comes in and she says a plane just went into one of the World Trade Centers. And I turned on the TV there, turned on a bunch of stuff, and I saw that. And I said, I had the same reaction as I had in Kansas City when Oklahoma City was bombed. And I turned on because of those guys ended up being in the military and did a lot of work on that case. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was, this has got to be some kook flying down the East River, made a wrong turn and just crashed in there. And so didn't think a whole lot of it. I knew we were going to scramble resources. And then the progression just kept going. Mm-hmm. So I grabbed the stuff and the director said, I walked upstairs with him. He went back to his office. I went and got stuff because I knew what was coming. And I went back downstairs and just started to work. And one of the issues that I'd learned a long time ago in crisis, you've got to stand up and perform, and you need people that understand what you want them to do. And they weren't there. I mean, I had a lot of good people, but a lot of them were scattered in the field. So I started calling and said, hey, I won't call their names. You need to get back here. And of course they couldn't, but they did everything they could for a couple of days. Mm-hmm. When I went upstairs, I got some stuff, but I called home and I said I won't be home for a while. And my wife had the kids, and she said, I understand. And that that started a 71-day straight working right through to on Thanksgiving. But I'd go home late at night, like 12 or 1 o'clock, and I'd get back up around 5 or 6 and just grind it out. We grinded out. Everybody wanted, the foreign people were in my knickers, not knickers, but, we leveraged them. Germany had a cell that they didn't know much about, that after we identified who the bad guys were. And all the countries, how can we help? Afraid they'd get blamed for something. So it was just a grind. It was grind. And people were very angry. I remember my brothers being very angry about it. And my mother, rest her soul, was very angry about it. And they'd call and say, I can't believe this, and blah, blah, blah. But an interesting thing happened, though. For me personally, I never got angry until Thanksgiving. And I took Thanksgiving off. And I thought, wow, these people are really nasty. We really need to do something about this. And that was kind of a mindset that kind of triggered on me. But about 3 or 4 days into it of 9/11, and most people don't understand this, I realized that who did that were dead. The people on the bad guys that all crashed the planes, they're dead. We've got them all identified. We'll know, the investigation will determine exactly when they stopped at 7-Eleven somewhere or rented a film, whatever their travel. I mean, we would know that because we had massive people looking at that situation. And then I said, something, I done put this on the back burner for me. I'm going to let these people do the investigative part, but we need to look at, are there other people here?
Right.
So I took off on that, and that was what I tried to do. And through INS and just proactively looking to see if there were cells somewhere that were planning to do something else. And I was really worried about that. But thank goodness it didn't happen. I will tell you, though, there was a huge interest by bureau agents, particularly retired agents, friends of mine, as well as just people calling, that I try to catch the calls between when I was going home, coming back, and call them as much as I can. And they're begging to say, let me jump back there and help. Let me work it. I need to work this stuff. I'll dump the trash. I'll make coffee, whatever we can do. Of course, we couldn't use them under federal law. So that I knew that. I knew everybody in the country would do anything. DOJ said, you need anything. You need any Title 50 stuff, you let us know, we'll do it. And they were very aggressive about it. So it developed, and I brought a special team in that I trusted. They'd worked for me, that you could beat them like a dog, and they'd come back the next day fully charged. So, I don't mean that literally, but, you get used to people. And right. I realized that in the crisis, the deputy director told me this before a long time ago. He said, Del, if you go out someplace and you think you need 5 agents, he said, you take 10. He said, you can never catch up on resources if you show up without enough.
Very true.
And I'm sure you've experienced that.
Oh,
a lot of stories involved here, a lot of stories, false alarms and stuff like that. And there's a nuclear bomb headed on a train from Philadelphia to Harrison, the capital. It turned out to be phony. I mean, there were car bombs in front of the State Department. The Capitol's on fire. And I mean, it was a wild time. Unbelievable, really.
Who are the idiots that call that stuff in?
I don't know, but it gets up to me. I mean, what are we going to say? Hey, this is not put in the trash, I mean, you had to work that. I mean, really, they should be charged if you ever find out who calls those things.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if you've seen in the news down here, but the sheriff over in Volusia County they were having tons of bomb threats into schools. Yeah. And he just got fed up with it. So they started tracking down who were making the calls. And of course, it's juveniles that are trying to get out of class, and he's charging them. And I love it.
That's good. The guy that helped me develop the proactive program, he's a professor out of California. He's called me several times trying to say, why don't we put a plan in place for schools? They'll have a plan at least. It won't be like some of these shootings that nobody knew what to do. Even though those guys in Texas, I think, were trained. I don't know what happened in that one, Uvalde, but
Yeah.
There are certain things, and you can't overlook having a strategic plan either.
That's exactly right.
You're in one of those jobs, you're going to get hammered if you don't. And
Yep.
it's the CYA is trying to figure it out.
Right. It seems like there's a better plan.
Yeah.
I want to touch on one thing here before I let you go. Is there were some incidents involving anthrax coming through the mail. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was down in Miami. Was that the one you're talking about? Almost immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a situation in Miami, and I've really forgotten the facts around this, but I remember it. And that tied us up. There was letters mailed out of New Jersey, and we had that place up in Frederick, Maryland that was shot off on the wrong person, so to speak, for a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's frightening. An interesting story, though. Even this happened a couple of years ago. A female agent that I knew, came up to me and said, "Hey, Dell, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing okay." She said, "You saved my life." And I said, "What? I don't think so." And she said, "Yeah, I was on the Miami evidence response team. We were ready to go to New York to the bombing site. Remember you calling down and calling it off? We were kind of disappointed, but because of the anthrax case."
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Didn't get sick. A lot of FBI agents have died going through that rubble, New York and in D.C. So it keeps on giving."
It's funny because when at SOD, I was relatively new there after 9/11. Like I said, I'd only been there 3 weeks, and my Exec was Derek Maltz at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Stone Cold New Yorker. And after several weeks, I thought, well, what is it we could do to help the folks in New York City? So I was a staff coordinator. I was GS-14 at the time. And I put it out amongst all the staff coordinators. Hey, I'm going to go see about renting us some vans. If you want to participate in this, you're going to have to take your own personal time off, vacation time, and let's load up. We'll find a hotel somewhere up there. Our whole purpose is to go help go through the rubble, do whatever they need us to do. And a lot of people in SOD signed up for it. I went through Derek, and he's like, yes, it's very Admiral Murph, what you want to do, but let's run this up the chain here. Well, the SAC of New York came back, and he put out a DEA-wide order. No agents are to come to New York City. There's enough help here already, and the conditions are not conducive for your personal safety and your personal health. And I always thought, man, that just sucks, because we were going to do our part to go help somebody.
Right.
But he saved our lives, because we see so many of the heroes that did go up there that were there suffering from respiratory disease, lung cancer, all the things that are going on.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Man. So you told us you left the Bureau in 2002. Was there a specific reason, or you just wanted to move on and try something different, or you just fed up with the BS going on?
I always said it's sleep deprivation. I mean, it didn't slack up very much at all. And believe me, there were plenty of stuff going on. And I realized, I'd always said, somebody asked me, "Dale, how long you going to be here?" And at the time, the retirement mandatory was 57. I'd say I'm going to 57. A lot of thought, and I said, I'm fine. This is a job. I'm in a position where I can influence and do something good for the good. So I kept going. Got a lot of pressure from other people about, well, who were involved and what's your next plan and stuff like that. So I was working continuously. The FBI hired a guy that was from IBM to run their technical stuff. New guy at headquarters. You'd see him in the hall. He had the 10-yard stare. I mean, didn't know culture or anything. So the Winter Olympics came up out in Utah. I was responsible for that. So I was going out to Utah and making sure they didn't need much help, but making sure that we had the right resource and doing the right thing. And I said, "Why don't you come along with me? I'm going to be gone." I think it was 2 nights or something. He said, "I'd really appreciate that." And so we flew out there, got in there at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. And he's looking forward to going to the hotel. I said, "No, we got a meeting at 8 o'clock. I mean, a legit meeting. We went at 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. He says, "Lee Dale," he says, "I'd like to have breakfast with you in the morning. Can we have breakfast?" I said, "Yeah, 6:30. We got a 7:30 meeting." his eyes are staring. He said, you guys work this hard all the time? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, that's what we do. We work. He got me at breakfast, and he said he'd been at the Bureau about 4 months. And he said, Dell, he says, don't take this the wrong way. You're the last guy I want to say this to, but I think, have you considered retiring? I said, I'm going to be 57. And he says, well, how long are you going to work after you leave the Bureau? And I said, I've got to make up some money. I've been moved all around, houses and stuff like that. I'll probably work 10 years. And he says, well, every day you stay now, past 10 years, I mean, you're going to add it on the backside. Once he said that, I realized he's right. If I go to 57, I'm going to have to go to 67. But so I thought about it, and sleep deprivation was a real concern. They were calling, our operations center calling me at home between midnight and 5 a.m. and I don't want to embellish it. It's like I'm some great guy or something. Probably 2-3 times, not necessarily that much, maybe 3 times, 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm here to tell you, Murph, that no one calls you at 2:30 in the morning, wakes everybody up in the house and says, hey, I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah, it's never a good thing.
And so I had a secure phone. You just roll over, hit the button, and say, okay, what is it this time? And it's kidnapping. The ambassador's been on the plane that's been hijacked. Okay, I'll be in on this one. What got me, though, was, you remember Pol Pot?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, somehow or another, this goes back a little bit. The Attorney General, Janet Reno, got involved in that. And there was an opportunity to grab him and fly him back to the States. She wanted to prosecute for war crimes or whatever. I mean, really interesting. She called me up and says, they'll blah, blah, blah. So I had to call, I think it was L.A. LA's jump team at that time. Called L.A., said, Thailand, wherever it was, Cambodia, I think it was. Picked this guy up, and they said, oh, yeah. So they're all packing up, going there. And so about 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from the operations center, and I'm getting up at 5 to go see how this is going. And they said, our PR guy, head of PR, he didn't call. But SIOC said, Mr. So-and-so wanted me to call you. I said, oh, okay. What is it? His message. He said, Pol Pot is dead. He did die over there. We never got our hands on him. I said, unless it's Jesus Christ, wouldn't this wait till 7? You want to rise from the dead? And it turned out to be a humorous story that I teased him about that for a long time.
Oh, yeah. You couldn't wait 2 more hours.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're right. Pol Pot, I thought you needed to know. And I said, yeah, okay.
Oh, thank you.
Easy stories,
Yeah. So when you retired from the Bureau, did you have another job lined up, or how they?
Yeah, let me real quick. I started getting this one company that I work for now, Booz Allen. Went through an executive recruiter call, and no, it didn't say it was Booz Allen or whatever. And they kept calling my secretary and saying, yeah, this company wants to talk to Dell, and she give me the message. I wouldn't do anything. I'm not talking to any of these people. And she says, one day she came in and said, would you just call this lady and tell her to quit calling over here if you're not going to do it? And I said, never mind. I'll call her. So I called her, and she said, yeah, a company is interested in talking to you. And it was Booz Allen. And I've never heard of that company or firm. I really didn't. And what do they want to talk about? And they said, well, they want to talk to you about a position. So I called them. They set up a meeting with me. I talked to 2 senior people with the company, and they said, Del, we'd really like to consider hiring you, and we want you to come out and enjoy it, and blah, blah, blah. It was really something. But the one thing that got me there, and I've seen it happen, is the ethics of this company. And so I went to work for them. And they have a very ethical program. They have a very enforced program. Can't lie, steal, cheat, do stupid things. And it appealed to me. I wanted to be around like-minded people in that regard. I didn't want to cheat on trying to get contracts or whatever. And so they said that, and they were very blunt about it. And one of them, Mark Gorenzer, said that we a lot of times we tell the client that they want us to do something that's not what you need. And I'm thinking, yeah, right. But I actually saw that. I actually saw that happen. So they were an ethical company. They treated me very well over the years. I left for a short period of time to run a company up in Long Island, and the owner wanted to try to get it up to sell. But then I came back, and I worked with them 20-something years now. So
Wow.
it's
Wow.
a great company. I would give them a plug, and great people here. And I recommend a lot of people come over here. So I'm disappointed. That's that. That's what I'm doing. And my 10-year plan turned into 20, I guess. And I stayed.
Yeah.
So, but that was good. Lots of other stuff. I know we're running out of time. I got to get going. I know you do too. I've enjoyed it. I hope people understand it's not about me. I intentionally try to dodge all of that talk.
Right.
But we had great people. I will tell you, we had great people. We didn't fool around with people. There are two types of people, really. The ones that, when the whistle blows, they perform, and others that they just can't do it. But I wasn't mean-spirited. I always tried to treat people as if the roles were reversed, and I had some goofy rules that I'd give everybody, not to follow, but to kind of get a feel for what I expect. No one ever lied to me, stuff like that. And career killers were take credit for somebody else's work, tell me a lie. There's one more, but I can't remember it right now.
Well, and I'll tell our listeners here too.
Be loyal, and that's not blind loyalty. And you got to have the courage to stand up and say, well, that's not a good idea. And I was talked out of doing some really stupid things that probably got people hurt.
Yeah.
Because of the integrity of the other people that didn't fear retribution on my part to it.
Well, and just for our listeners here, I was going to say that as long as I've known you, to get stories out of you, I've usually had, it's like pulling teeth. You don't want to take credit for anything. I know the position you were in. I know the significance of that position, and I'm familiar with a lot of the battles that you had to fight. I think you did it all for the right reason, and those reasons are being a patriot that's trying to protect our country and the citizens of our country, and that's all admirable traits. You're fighting every day against Congress. You're fighting against DOJ. You're fighting against Type A personalities within our own agencies. The fact that you stuck it out as long as you did, man, is a testament to your work ethic and your love for our country is what it boils down to. And just before you go, I want to ask you, one more question. Would you consider, what would you think about people? Would you recommend that people look at law enforcement as a career or maybe become an FBI agent given today's circumstances?
Yes, I would. And I'll take the FBI first. They drifted into an area that was never should have drifted into, and that was in the political side. Mm-hmm. I remember I never had a political sign up in my yard. I've never had a political, and I have strong opinions put on the back of the car or any of those stickers or any of that stuff. And I never, ever allowed political discussion at any meeting at the FBI that I had. And, you can talk about that at home. You can talk about it wherever you want to with your friends, but it has no place. And I learned a real strong lesson about that when I was a young agent in Birmingham. I was working a lot of rural counties, three rural counties, and the sheriff was running for re-election. We got this opponent. It's a close race, and it was like 40 days out from the election, and I'm a young agent. I don't know much about anything, but the supervisor calls me and says, here's this letter accusing the sheriff of malfeasance and stealing money out of the gun licensing or something that was very damaging to the sheriff. And I said, oh, okay, good. I'll get on this today. He said, you're not going to do anything with this. I'm telling you, we're putting this in the zero file, and the day after the election or when it's decided, we'll move forward with it. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. So it didn't do anything, and it ran the whole thing down in less time than it. It's an easy case. And it turned out to be a poison pen, one of his opponents.
Yeah.
Knowing full well, the supervisor told me, he said, Del, you go up there and ask any questions about this thing before the election, you'll throw the election. And I said, I got it. I understand. And I took that to heart. And ran with them for 20-something years. So,
Yep.
But they need good people. They need honorable people. And that's an honorable profession. But you have to really want to do it. It's a hard burden, as you well know, on your families. I missed a lot of birthdays and stuff that you can't make up. And you have to have a family that understands that.
Yep.
And if you're in the goofy side of the house, where it's all classified, you can't talk about it anyway. And
right.
I think it was polygraphed like 18 times.
Holy cow.
Mainly toward the end around media leaks and stuff. And I never talked to a reporter or anything that they wanted me to talk to without a witness, even on the phone. So I didn't leak it. And let's see what else. Been sued a lot, different types of things, and had some internal affairs investigation that never stuck. So people can complain about a lot of things.
Yeah, kind of comes with the territory, doesn't it?
It does, and it never really impacted me enough to change the course of action that I wanted to do. So I don't know. Did that answer your question? I wouldn't highly recommend it, but you really have to want it. You really need to take a look at, because you're probably, if you grew up in Chantilly, you're probably not going to be in Chantilly area.
Right.
You're going to be somewhere many times moved around.
Right.
So that's something people have to get used to.
Yeah.
And good behavior when you're young. I decided I wanted to be an agent in 8th grade. That's a different story, but that's what my plan was.
Mm-hmm.
Plans. And I didn't know if I could make it. If I couldn't make it, then I was going to do something else, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well,
all right.
Brother, thank you so much for giving us your time, for being so transparent. You are involved in so many high-profile investigations, terroristic activity. For our listeners here, this is a man that has served his country faithfully, loyally. He is a true hero, which he will never admit. He's absolutely, without question, a patriot who has gone out of his way to protect our country and all of us. To have him on here, I don't know that he's ever given another interview anywhere like this. So this is a real treat and an honor for me to have you on here, Dale. Thank you. I could never repay you back, brother, but I certainly hope we stay in contact. To our listeners, everybody stick around. We'll see what comes up next week. But thank you for following us on Game of Crimes with Murphs in the Morning. See you next time. Well, unfortunately, that's it for this week's episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. Thank you folks so much for taking the time to see and hear some of the best true crime content you can find anywhere. None of this would be possible without your support. If you didn't know this already, Game of Crimes is now on YouTube. Just type in Game of Crimes Podcast in the YouTube search bar. You can send me your comments on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or to our email address, which is gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com. Our website, it's gameofcrimespodcast.com. That's where you'll find all our episodes, books written by our guests, merchandise, and more. If you're looking for even more content, now go over to patreon.com/gameofcrimes and sign up. There you'll find several bonus episodes each month, ranging from serious and current topics to some silly and fun events. And you can even get early access to each week's interviews before they drop on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can even subscribe for free and hear the first 5 minutes of each episode, and that's to help you decide if you'd like to spend some of your hard-earned cash to hear more. That's patreon.com/gameofcrimes. To all our guests here on Game of Crimes, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. I mean that sincerely. Thank you for your service to your communities, your countries, and for taking the time to tell us about your adventurous lives. May God bless and protect all the men and women in law enforcement, our military, and all of our first responders. And you know what? This goes for all of our listeners as well. Thank you for your continued support. And just one last thought here. It's okay for us to have different ideas and different opinions, but it doesn't mean we can't continue to be friends. All right, my final thank you. Thanks for joining me again to play the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes. I'll see y'all next week.